we know well, what might cause them to develop it. Do we know how to spot it? What are the signs that you guys might be looking for the anxiety? How would you know my child might have anxiety? Something might be going on. And I have a little cheat here for you guys. So feel free to cheat and just read off the slide, right?
I will definitely agree with getting trouble to go to sleep. And some days I've noticed my daughter saying every so often, Mommy, my tummy hurts in me, and it's kind of odd because she's generally a healthy child. So for her to complain of a stomach ache is an odd thing. And of course, difficulty getting to sleep. We've never had that issue before. She can go to sleep on point. Once that time comes up, she's off to sleep. And definitely to control people and events, yeah. Bossing everybody around the house, trying to have her own way. We're getting a lot of those behaviors. So we have had some changes that will bring on a certain level of anxiety at this time. So I am quite aware to expect some kind of change. So this is just giving me confirmation that yes, there is an effect happening. Because as you know, it's difficult for them to explain themselves to say, well, I really miss this one, or I don't like that this is happening. So this is really confirming for me that there is some anxiety. So I look forward to the next slide that says, how do I manage with it? So that's my 2 cents.
Yes. And it's so good.
Nicholette, we have questions too from Mr. Cyril Barron and Ms. Claire Guy Allen.
No problems. So yes, it's so good that you're able to identify those changes, and because that's what we need to actually know when to kick in with the coping strategies, right? So, Cyril Barron, sure, share with us.
Hi, good evening, and thank you.
Hi.
I had my hand raised here because it's something in terms of, I don't know the extent of anxiety to which it may refer, but it's in terms of my son, who is 14 years old, who will continuously on a daily basis ask about getting married and finding a wife for him. And he will ask this question on a daily basis. Now, I don't know if it will be classified as anxiety, but sometimes it causes us as parents to become anxious and have that sense of being anxious, because we wonder what is going on in their mind, and the next thing he will continue to talk about having to go and rent, build a own home, and these things. So, and even another thing is, like, if he goes, say for example, out to maybe a next door, and we have maybe a social gathering, sometimes maybe children his age may not want to associate with him. So sometimes these things also cause a bit of anxiety. So I was just wondering in terms of how that could be classified as anxiety and how these would be addressed. I thank you.
No problem. Thank you for contributing. So yes, we will definitely get into more of what anxiety might look like soon. However, there are definitely different components of anxiety, and the cognitive part is a really important part to play, because what happens is that our children have these recurring thoughts, and it's always playing in their minds, and it's going, what if, I need this, and they're worrying constantly. And so definitely that could be a sign that he's anxious about something. Miss Claire Guy, did you change your mind? I'm not seeing your hand anymore.
Yes. What I was thinking as well, children sometimes urinate on themselves when they are anxious, when they are suffering from that anxiety attack. They may even have faces, so because sometimes they feel so embarrassed, they're so anxious, and their body is reacting in a way that it's not normally, that would not normally happen.
Yes, definitely. So, I love how you guys are just including all the different aspects of anxiety. So, yes, there are definitely physical changes that might happen. And the thing about anxiety is they don't always need to have physical, cognitive, behavioral. Some children respond or present differently with the anxiety. And so some might just have a lot of physical responses. And that's what you have to pay attention for. Dr. Crystal Jane Verasamy.
Yes, hi, good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to add two things as well to Nicholette, what Nicholette was saying. One is that, so when looking at signs for anxiety, it's important to note that there are marked changes. So, for instance, I think Kayla would have mentioned that her daughter recently started to have tummy aches. So, it's not continuous symptoms we're looking at, but anything that leads to a marked change in behavior, right? And then the other thing would be it's always important first to check with a GP, a general practitioner first, to rule out if there's any medical issues before we can say that it's related to anxiety. So I just wanted to add that.
Yes, definitely. Those two things are really important. And we'll explain a little more about that, about why later. I see one more person before we continue. Mr. Wayne Stanley.
Listen, good afternoon, ma'am. Thank you for acknowledging me. I just have one quick question. Does ADHD and anxiety mirrors each other at some point in time? That's my question.
Okay, no problem. So the thing about a lot of these disorders is that they have similar presentations. So something that you might see with ADHD is the inattentiveness, the getting lost in their thoughts, and then also if the person is hyperactive, you see the behavior acting out, which we will see as well happens with children with anxiety. They may act out, they may have emotional outbursts, and the challenge we have is that even children with ADHD have emotion regulation challenges, and so it gets very blurred sometimes. And it could be difficult for a parent to know. And in that case, you would see a professional just to get some clarity. But there's definitely overlap in terms of having ADHD and having emotion regulation challenges and having anxiety. And then having anxiety, and having Down syndrome as well, it could definitely overlap in that way. So, just to highlight some of the additional things you might look for. So the physical, like we were saying before, let me use my pointer here. Like we were saying before, there is a lot of physical changes. So the bedwetting, difficulty sleeping, the bad dreams, difficulty with just tummy problems, dizziness, headaches. They might go to the bathroom very, very often. All of those things can be seen for a child who has anxiety. But then also you have the emotional and cognitive changes. So they might have mood swings, angry outbursts. And like Kayla was saying earlier, it has still something to do with they don't really know what's going on with them and they just explode. And so you see it acting out, you see the acting out coming out, you see the quarreling, the anger, and the confusion that they have. And then the cognitive part, like Mrs. Cyril was saying, is the what ifs, the constant thinking, the constant worrying. And it might even go forward to their school and different activities, thinking about how they're performing, what others might think about them. And all of this can be part of the presentation of anxiety. And then the behavioral. So the behavioral now is what they might do in the end. They might avoid situations. They don't want to do certain activities. They want to quit things that they were in before. Or they might just start eating excessively. They may deal with it differently. Additionally, you might even see in children with Down syndrome weight loss, poor self-care. Something that will be really important to note is just regression in terms of how they process information, their memory, their reasoning, how they're learning, their learning abilities during that time. All of that can also be affected if the child is experiencing anxiety. So, I just wanted to briefly introduce to you guys what it looks like. So, it's a cycle. There's a trigger event, they have anxious thoughts, the feeling pumps up, there's activation in the brain, there are the physical responses, they can't think straight, their thoughts are irrational, they have more anxious thoughts and feelings, and it just keeps going and keeps going until we de-escalate them. And so this definitely can be cyclical for some children. Okay, so now I want to show a little video very quickly about, in terms of brain development and things that we might want to know about how it works, right, for kids.
Science tells us that the experiences we have in the first years of our lives actually affect the physical architecture of the developing brain. This means that brains aren't just born, they're also built over time based on our experiences. Just as a house needs a sturdy foundation to support the walls and roof, a brain needs a good base to support all future development. Positive interactions between young children and their caregivers literally build the architecture of the developing brain. Building a sturdy foundation in the earliest years provides a good base for a lifetime of good mental function and better overall health. So just how is a solid brain foundation built and maintained in a developing child? One way is through what brain experts call serve and return interactions. Imagine a tennis match between a caregiver and a child, but instead of hitting a ball back and forth across a net, various forms of communication pass between the two, from eye contact to touch, from singing to simple games like peekaboo. These interactions, repeated throughout a young person's developing years, are the bricks that build a healthy foundation for all future development. But another kind of childhood experience shapes brain development too, and that's stress. Good kinds of stress, like meeting new people or studying for a test, are healthy for development because they prepare kids to cope with future challenges. Another kind of stress, called toxic stress, is bad for brain development. If a child is exposed to serious ongoing hardships like abuse and neglect, and he has no other caregiver in his life to provide support, the basic structures of his developing brain may be damaged. Without a sturdy foundation to properly support future development, he is at risk for a lifetime of health problems, development issues, even addiction. It's possible to fix some of the damage of toxic stress later on, but it's easier, more effective, and less expensive to build solid brain architecture in the first place. One of the things building sturdy brain architecture supports is the development of basic emotional and social skills, an important group of skills which scientists call executive function and self-regulation, can be thought of like air traffic control in the child's mental airspace. Think of a young child's brain as the control tower at a busy airport, all those planes landing and taking off, and all of the support systems on the ground simultaneously demand the controller's attention to avoid a crash. It's the same with a young child learning to pay attention, plan ahead, and remember and follow lots of rules. Like all of us, kids have to react to things happening in the world around them, while also dealing with worries, temptations, and obligations on their mind. As these demands for attention pile up, air traffic control helps a child regulate the flow of information, prioritize tasks, and above all, find ways to manage stress and avoid mental collisions along the way. Having this ability is a necessity for positive and level mental health. Developing effective air traffic control, overcoming toxic stress, and building solid brain architecture are things kids can't do on their own. And since strong societies are made up of healthy, contributing individuals, it's up to us as a community to make sure all young people have the kinds of nurturing experiences they need for positive development. To build better futures, we need to build better brains.
Yes. So, yes. Thank you guys so much for watching the video with me. And it was just to highlight, just part of what happens in the brain and how the different experiences we have can impact how our brains develop, and then also how we respond to situations that make us anxious, situations that make us scared. And so it's really important for us to be there to be able to display how to regulate that emotion, how to regulate your thoughts and whatnot. So I'm excited to have you guys here with us to learn more about it.